Before we go more into curl, you'll have to know a little bit more about how web applications work. Whenever you do anything over the web, all that's happening is you're sending a packet that has some information to a server, and then the server responds. Exactly what your packet looks like, in other words, what text you are sending to the other server, depends on how they're going to respond. There are two basic types of requests. There are requests where everything is in the URL, and there are requests where not everything is in the URL. The type of request where everything is in the URL is called a GET request. When you do a GET request, you can see exactly what you get. When you want to do a search on Google, you actually don't have to enter everything in the text box down here. You could do it all over the URL bar. The way that you would do that is you would pass in a variable. So you would go to the web page search, and then you would put a question mark. Everything after the question mark in a web page is variables. The name of the variable, in this case, is Q, which stands for query, and then you would say equals for the value of the variable, and then anything after that is whatever value that variable has. So here, if we want to search for Stanford Open Classroom, then this URL is all that we need in order to get to this search page. If you want to have two variables, you just need to separate them with ampersands. So if we put an ampersand in here and then foo equals bar, then Google probably doesn't know what the variable foo is, so it's not going to do anything with that. But in principle, Google got two variables here, one that was the Q variable, the other that was the foo variable. However, not everything that you do is in the URL bar. You may have noticed this because you might have went to a website, and even though the URL doesn't change, the content of the page that you see does change. That means that there are types of requests where not all of the information is in the URL bar. The most common of these is called a post. To see an example of a post, we'll go to a sample HTML learning website. Here you can see that they use form action post in the HTML of this little box here. And when we click send it, it'll go to a web page, and all of the variables are not specified in the URL, but yet the web page got all of the variables that we specified. And if we change this to something like Sam, then it'll still get that variable, and it'll put real name as Sam. Now let's do all of that in curl. If we want to issue a GET request in curl, it's pretty easy. All you have to do is say curl and then the URL. This issues a GET request for google.com. If we want to pass in any variables, then we would just say something like www.google.com/search $Q equals foo, and then that would issue a search for foo. And it looks like Google thinks that we've been doing too many searches, so they give us a forbidden message. But I digress. Doing a post is a little bit more complicated since you can't see exactly what you're posting, but you can if you look at the source code of a web page. So if we go here, and then we either view the page source directly, or better yet, use Google Chrome's Inspect Element feature, then you can see here we have a form whose method is post. That means that the form will post. It's going to post to this website, cgibin/mycgi.perl. And then you can see in here each of the different inputs that it's posting. So here, input name equals real name. What that means is that the name of this text box is real name. So it will submit something that has a variable whose name is real name. If you look down here, you'll say this input type is checkbox and its name is hates anchovies. What that means is that if we post a variable named hates anchovies, then it will get a variable whose name is hates anchovies. You can do this with any variable and any value. Let's see how it works in curl. If we curl and we paste in the website that all of that is getting posted to, and then we say -d for data, and then the name of the variable, so real name equals Sam, the value of the variable. And then you can see we got back the HTML of a web page, and it says real name Sam. If we want to pass in a second variable, then we would just add something to the end. So we would do another -d, because we have more data, and then we would say hates anchovies equals true. And now you have real name Sam, hates anchovies, true. And just to clarify, I hate eating anchovies because I'm a vegetarian. The fish themselves are perfectly fine. If there's a form that wants you to attach a particular file, then the way that you do that is, instead of using -d, you use -f for form. Then you can say variable, whatever the variable is. So I could say that, like, picture or something like that, if I wanted to attach a picture to this website. And then you say equals @. So the @ sign here will say that whatever I'm going to specify now is a file. And if I want to attach my .zshrc as a picture of myself, then it would attach that file. You can't mix -f and -d because it's a different type of HTTP request. The -f is a multi-part / form data. And you can see here that when we posted it to that script, it got a variable whose name is picture. And you can see the content type was a octet stream, so that's basically just saying we were sending a bunch of bytes over the network. The file name was .zshrc, and the size was 22,000 bytes. One thing that gets a little bit more complicated is if you want to pass in variables that have special characters in them. So for instance, the equal sign and the ampersand are both reserved characters in the URL, so you can't have them in variables. But what if you want to? In order to do something like that, you have to do what's called URL encoding them. And there is a full specification for exactly what you have to URL encode and how, but with curl, in recent versions, they make it pretty easy. You just have to, instead of using the -d flag, say --data -URL encode. So if I want to post something that's URL encoded, I would say --data -URL encode foo equals ampersand bar, and this would normally be interpreted as two separate variables. One that is a variable called foo, whose value is nothing, and a second, because ampersand separates different variables, and a second variable with bar, who also has no value. If we do it like this, foo will have the value of ampersand bar, because it is URL encoded. And you can see that, once again, the current version of curl is too old, but on your versions at home, this should work. Now you know everything you need in order to emulate a web browser's most basic functionality of getting data from web pages and posting data to web pages.